What's the worst mistake you've seen someone do in their job? Work in a brewery. One morning, a brewer went to run a clean in place on a 60-barrel vessel. After the vessels are empty, they usually are under some significant pressure, usually anywhere from 5 to 15 pounds per square inch. Guy did not take out the fermenter before taking the sample port off. These vessels had 2 ports on them, and we put a 1.5-inch cap on one port and a Perlick sample faucet on the other. He starts with the stainless steel cap. All of the pressure came out like a bullet. I could hear from the other side of a rather large facility. Dude got lucky and the cap barely missed his head. He did get a bunch of yeast and hop residue in his eyes, as his safety glasses were on top of his head and not covering his eyes. I drove him to the hospital and he's okay. Just got fired a couple weeks later. I was working in a tool and die shop in my early 20s, and I was watching an old guy, who was perpetually drunk, pound in an injector pin into a plastic injection mold with a big piece of steel round stock. Well, as he was pounding the pin in, he missed the pin and hit his thumb. It looked like his thumb exploded. He was in such pain he pissed himself. They ended up amputating down to the first knuckle. Then, to make matters worse, he got fired for being drunk on the job. Told the newbie to clean the steel panels on the deep fryers, expecting them to wipe them down with a cloth. They instead grabbed a jug of water and decided to rinse it, with water going into the still hot oil. Yanked them back so fast I nearly gave them whiplash. And an answer from Dad: a colleague dismantled the machine to fix it without first checking the pipes were cleared. The pipes were full of melted sugar, very hot. He got horrific burns that made the skin slough off his hands. I'm a car mechanic. Had a colleague once, who had a pretty small job on an engine, about an hour or two, and cost like $50. Made a mistake, quite big, but also quite common and easy to make. It's the well shit category, not something to drag him through the mud for. Started fixing it, made an even bigger mistake. At this point, we even had to outsource some issues we couldn't fix in-house. We were looking for about 2 weeks and $500, on us of course, not the customer. But it was still okay. We got everything back. He started putting the engine back together. All done, first run, whoopsie, another big problem, whole engine apart. Broke something again, outsourced, expensive. Overall, it was about a month-long procedure, hitting $1,000. Once it was done, he got fired. He got away with a lot, but at one point it was way too much. I'm a home appliance installer and was out working a pretty big job at some 20,000 square foot mansion. They had another installation team working on a second kitchen in the basement. One of these guys was drilling the mounting holes for the dishwasher into their granite countertop. Don't do this, okay? And drilled them too small, so when we went to secure it, a massive 4-foot chunk of granite split off and smashed into the floor, breaking a couple tiles in the process. Dude sounded like Yosemite Sam with his cussing, and the customer was pissed. I know 2 people who have made over $40,000 payment to scammers. They never got the money back. I didn't see it in person, but there was a video I saw on Reddit fairly recently where somebody emptied the used deep fryer oil into a plastic bucket. Needless to say, it didn't hold. A nurse friend told me a colleague hadn't been checking the pH aspirate from a baby's nasogastric tube, meant to do before every tube feed to make sure it's positioned correctly, etc. Baby ended up passing away because the tube had actually been passed into the lungs, not the stomach, due to an unknown cut being made during intubation the baby had previously had. So she had been feeding the milk into the lungs and essentially drowned the baby. I work for an IT company and my client is one of the biggest consumer goods providers on the planet. One time a project manager tried to deploy a 60-man-day project in a single week without any quality control whatsoever and ended up implementing discounts on products which weren't supposed to have them. So as you can imagine, things got super ugly super fast. Client lost about $1 billion in revenue, seriously, and our leadership got involved, fought for several months. It happened in our contract year with them too, and we almost lost them over this incident. The PM who delivered the project was first placed on leave, then eventually moved to another account. Adventures on Hazmat. When things go wrong, they go really wrong. There was the time we were doing an asbestos removal job in the pump house under one of those 250,000-gallon water tanks you see elevated 50 feet in the air. William broke a pipe fitting before the shut-off valve, so no way to shut it off. Asbestos waste washed out the containment, through the deacon and out the door. Was everywhere. And that's how William earned the name Quarter-Mil Bill. Have more. Once, I served drinks to a little girl and her mom. I accidentally got them mixed up. The mom ordered a mixed drink with bourbon and the daughter said her drink tasted funny. Had a buddy whose wife and he would play marathon WoW sessions into the early AM. First mistake was when he was caught by the network admins playing WoW from work, on the company laptop. After that happened he uninstalled the game and didn't play from the office, but would be on voice chat to guide his clannies and raids while on the clock. Last straw was when after one of those marathon sessions he fell asleep at his desk, and unfortunately for him our department head was strolling by and noticed him out like a light at his desk. He got canned that day. Really dumb because they had a young teen daughter to support, and while they lived paycheck to paycheck, it was a decent one, like upwards of $60,000, database developer. A guy working at my company. Let's call him Frank. Frank would steal products out of the warehouse, repeatedly. Frank dumped a bin of garbage on his subordinate's desk. Frank ran into a meeting, put his hands on the wall, and yelled, "I'm a black man." He was not a black man. Frank treated his female colleagues with disdain and disrespect. He ordered a female VP to get him coffee. Frank said in a meeting that someone is guaranteed to come into our building and shoot everyone. Frank was fired, but the dude had 9 lives. Nobody knows how he lasted so long. Found out months later that Frank was wanted in another country, along with his father. In the Army, I was assigned to a field artillery unit. During a training exercise, a gunner in our unit didn't align his tick marks up with a collimator correctly and his tank ended up shooting a dummy round into a formation of soldiers, killing 4 or 5. If it were a live round, the whole unit would have been decimated. Dude got 15 years or more in Leavenworth. Me and a few other co-workers were complaining about a new hire, who happened to be black. We were upset because he wasn't showing up, not doing what he was supposed to, and leaving us to pick up the slack. We're all pitching reasonable punishments. He should be suspended, he should be written up, he should be fired, and so on. Well, one of our other new hires, I'll call him Jeff, decided to join in on the conversation and said, "You know, I got a few cousins out in Virginia. We could always lynch him." We were all dumbfounded and ripped Jeff a new one for suggesting such a thing. He was reported for saying that and was suspended for about a week, and I'm still shocked they didn't fire him on the spot. Well, few weeks later we have another new hire who is also black. He was hanging up one of our safety chains and accidentally dropped it. As the new guy is picking it back up, Jeff comes by and says, "With your ancestry, I think you know how to handle a chain." Jeff didn't get suspended that time, he got fired on the spot. And he insisted he didn't understand why he was being punished. He was a fucking idiot. Management. They knew more than 6 months in advance that the workload on the whole department would triple. We already were kinda pushing the limits. We'd barely had enough people for even the current workload. They failed to hire any new staff to handle that vastly ramped up workload. And didn't warn us. At all. Suddenly, work was hell. Customer upon customer flooded in with work, and these were internal, meaning part of the same company, customers. So when they got mad, they could look us up in the company email system and find out our managers and scream at them to get us fired. Which they did fairly often. They also screamed at us. It wasn't unusual to be screamed at 2 to 3 times a day, or more. Some days, every customer we spoke to screamed at us. The work pace was ridiculously intense. There were no breaks, and managers were recording bathroom break times and handing out write-ups for going to them too much, and if we insisted it was needed, they'd demand we sign a full HIPAA release so they could access our medical record and judge for themselves if we needed the bathroom that much, and yes, this specific action was directly okayed by HR. People quit left and right. I quit and moved. The department manager got fired, and eventually all but the most crony-like idiots who were shit at the job were left. I can't imagine what happened after that, because everyone I knew who worked there quit, or I stopped talking to. I've no idea how that epic fuck-up ended. But I can say that there were huge consequences for the company if they did crash and burn hard. I don't know if it was the executive management denying money to hire more staff, or if our director just thought he could look good by making people work 3 times as hard for the same pay. But there was no way that department wasn't gonna eventually implode spectacularly. And it was entirely management's fault. Roger, the recovering meth addict who lived in our basement, offered his services as a car mechanic on Craigslist for cheap. One day, he took a frat bro's brand new BMW to fix a minor issue and ended up getting fucked up on methadone and taking the entire engine apart. Roger did not remember how to put it back together. But he tried. He got about halfway through and then decided to reward his persistence with a little methadone as a treat. Poor frat bro came to pick up his ride and found the keys in the ignition with the extra parts left over after the rebuild piled in his trunk. Roger is now in prison.